Good morning, St. Francis. Good morning, people of God. It is Thursday, the 12th day of May, 2022. It is Thursday of the fourth week of Easter. It is the 26th day of Easter. Coming to you on this Thursday morning from our Magnolia Circle, that again is by our trailer extensions of our school, the Franciscan School, but our Magnolia is coming into bloom at this time of the year. So again, a glorious sight as the Magnolia blossoms. Just if you're coming around the campus anytime, next couple of days, to come to the circle and to take a look at how beautiful the Magnolia is blossoming. In today's readings, we hear of Paul now speaking in the synagogue of Antioch, and basically giving an outline of Jewish history to provide the context for the revelation of Christ as the Messiah to the people of Israel, and then now by extension to all people all over the world. And again, it is Paul who does this. Again, his name has changed in the in the narrative of Acts of the Apostles, but is it a true changing of his name? Again, many people will say that the taking of names of religious men and women, religious nuns, monks, friars, whatever it was in the past, was always done kind of an imitation, not just of what God does with Abraham to change his name from Abram to Abraham, but also the fact that Saul, once he has his conversion, becomes Paul. Not necessarily the case, perhaps, as scholarship begins to show, is that in many cases, people who were in business, especially as Paul was, because he says he was a tent maker, they had to have a name that could be understood by a variety of languages and in different cultural contexts in which he might find himself as basically a business person, a trader. And so he was Saul in his Jewish exchanges, in his Jewish enterprises, and he would be Paul in his Greek enterprises, because again, in the Eastern Mediterranean, Greek was the language that was most commonly spoken. And Paul, though being a Jew, would have been someone, again, who would have also had a Jewish name. So he probably had two names, and as he moves out of Israel, as he moves out of the Holy Land and into the greater non-Jewish Mediterranean, he adopts the name of Paul to be able to be known and understood in being able to preach in the synagogues and in the marketplaces. So Paul's command, not only of Hebrew, but also of Greek, is something that has to be known and accepted. Again, the fitting of Jesus into the context of history is what is important to Paul as a starting point to be able to bring the good news, that this is not some kind of novelty, this is not some kind of incursion into Judaism or into the understanding of Judaism. This is a part of God's plan from the very beginning. And again, that is adopting a very important scriptural, Franciscan scriptural understanding of things that comes from the theologian John Duns Scotus. There's nothing that Paul says in this speech to the synagogue in Antioch that it was because of original sin that Jesus has to come, or because we disobeyed God horribly and ate an apple that we should defeat him. It is a part of God's plan, and Scotus taught that from the beginning. It was not accepted because you can't do much with that mileage as you can with the fact that we are sinful and terrible and awful, and we need people to constantly correct us. But the reality is that the coming of the Messiah was always a part of God's plan, and Paul begins his preaching to those synagogues outside of Israel with that very understanding, with that very fact. In John's Gospel, we are in the great discourse that happens at the Last Supper in John's Gospel. Again, the Last Supper does not contain bread and wine, body and blood. It contains feet washing. And we begin to hear now the part of that discourse that is after Jesus has washed the feet of the disciples. And he basically says that no one is greater than anybody else. That for us to be able to spread the gospel, for us to be able to become witnesses of truth, of understanding, of hope, and of light, and of love, we have to know that each of us matter, that each of us is on the same playing field, that it is God who is the one who is above all, not each one of us above each other. And until we get past that, then the message is going to, stumble. We will not succeed if we keep trying to take places of honor above and beyond each other. But we have to, again, treat each other with the dignity, value, and worth. Again, that starts with washing each other's feet, with finding no task that is too small or too negligible or too unheard of to be able to do for each other, to help each other to live and embrace our own dignity and worth. Again, the resurrection is always about pointing us in that direction of remembering that and knowing that and holding on to it again and again and again. To know that each of us have a dignity and worth that has value, that has meaning, that has purpose, and that has God's will invested in it. That is what makes us a powerful force in this world, a powerful force for love and for hope, for understanding and for care. A blessed Easter, St. Francis and people of God. May the Lord continue to give you his peace.